In the gritty outskirts of San Cristóbal, where the screech of metal meets the whispers of danger, stood Martinez Auto Works, a humble mechanic shop that would become the unlikely battleground between a ruthless cartel and its owner, Danny Martinez. What the cartel didn't know was that beneath the grease-stained coveralls and calloused hands lay the heart of a retired SWAT officer who was about to remind them why you should never judge a book by its cover. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. San Cristóbal wasn't always a town that lived in shadows. Nestled in the sun-beaten valleys of southern Texas, just 15 miles from the Mexican border, it had once been a thriving community where hard work and honest living went hand in hand. The town had grown around the intersection of two major highways, making it a natural stop for truckers, travelers, and locals alike. Among its most respected establishments was Martinez Auto Works, a fortress of steel and concrete that had served the community faithfully for the past 7 years. Danny Martinez had chosen this location carefully when he retired from the Dallas SWAT team. After 20 years of high-stakes operations and split-second decisions, he'd wanted something simpler, something he could build with his own hands. Cars had always been his first love, even before he joined law enforcement, and the satisfaction of fixing things provided a different kind of peace than what he'd found in his previous life. The shop itself was more than just a business. It was a testament to Danny's attention to detail and strategic mind. The main garage was spacious enough to accommodate 6 vehicles, with high ceilings and industrial fans that kept the Texas heat at bay. Tools were organized with military precision, each piece in its place, ready for action. The office, elevated above the workshop floor, gave a clear view of both the garage and the sprawling lot outside, a habit from his SWAT days of always maintaining situational awareness. To the casual observer, Danny appeared to be nothing more than a skilled mechanic in his early 50s, his salt-and-pepper hair and weather-worn face telling stories of years spent under the hood of countless vehicles. His hands, strong and steady, could diagnose an engine's ailment by touch alone, and his reputation for honest work had spread throughout the county. Few knew about his past life, and that's exactly how he preferred it. The shop employed a small but loyal crew. Mike Thompson, a young ex-army mechanic who'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan. Sarah Chen, a brilliant diagnostic technician who could coax the secrets from any computer system, and Carlos Ruiz, a local kid Danny had taken under his wing, teaching him both the trade and the value of hard work. Together, they handled everything, from routine maintenance to complex repairs, serving both the local community and the steady stream of trucks that passed through town. But San Cristóbal had been changing. The signs were subtle at first: new faces in town, expensive cars with tinted windows, hushed conversations that stopped when strangers passed by. Danny noticed it all, his old instincts never quite dormant. The Los Hierros cartel had been expanding their territory, pushing their tendrils deeper into Texas, and San Cristóbal's strategic location made it an ideal logistics hub for their operations. The first hint of trouble came on a sweltering Tuesday afternoon. A black Escalade with Mexican plates rolled into the shop, its engine making a distinctive knocking sound that spoke of neglect. The driver, a young man with elaborate tattoos, snaking up his neck, asked for immediate service, laying a stack of $100 bills on the counter. Danny took the job. It was still business after all, but he noted every detail: the reinforced suspension, the subtle bulge of concealed weapons under expensive jackets, the way the men scanned the shop with too much interest. That night, as Danny locked up the shop, he found himself running through old mental exercises from his SWAT days, cataloging escape routes, identifying defensive positions, noting sight lines and potential cover. 7 years of peace had not dulled his instincts. They had merely been sleeping, waiting for a reason to awaken. In his modest house on the outskirts of town, Danny sat on his back porch, cleaning parts from an old Chevy engine as the sun set behind the distant mountains. The familiar routine of breaking down and rebuilding mechanical components had always helped him think. He knew what was coming. He'd seen it before in countless operations. The cartel was testing the waters, mapping out the territory, identifying potential assets and obstacles. His shop's location and reputation made it a prime target for their operations. As darkness settled over San Cristóbal, Danny made a decision. He wouldn't run, wouldn't close up shop and move on. This town, these people, they had become his home, his responsibility. If the cartel thought they could simply walk in and take what they wanted, they were about to learn a harsh lesson about underestimating their opponents. The skills and instincts he'd honed over 20 years of SWAT operations hadn't faded. They'd just been waiting for the right moment to resurface. Over the next few weeks, the Black Escalade became a regular visitor to Martinez Auto Works, always accompanied by different high-end vehicles, Mercedes, Audis, and lifted trucks with custom paint jobs. Each time, the cartel members grew bolder, lingering longer, asking questions that had nothing to do with automotive repair. They were particularly interested in the shop's layout, the security system, and the steady flow of trucks that passed through for maintenance. Danny kept his responses professional but guarded, playing the role of a simple mechanic while observing every detail. He noticed how they mapped out his property with their eyes, noted the camera's positions, tested the strength of the garage doors. His SWAT training had taught him to recognize surveillance when he saw it. And this was textbook Cartel reconnaissance. One morning, Danny arrived early to find Mike Thompson already at the shop, his face tight with concern. "Boss, you need to see this," Mike said, leading him to the back lot. Fresh tire tracks crisscrossed the gravel and the lock on the storage. Container had been tampered with, not broken but tested. Someone had been examining their security during the night. "They're getting impatient," Danny muttered, running his fingers over the scratched lock. He'd seen this pattern before during his SWAT days, criminals testing boundaries before making their move. "Mike, get Sarah and Carlos in early today. We need to talk." When the team gathered in the office, Danny closed the blinds and spoke in low, measured tones. "I need to tell you something about my past," he began, "and about what's coming our way." For the next hour, he explained his history with Dallas SWAT, the signs he'd been observing, and his suspicions about the cartel's intentions. Sarah Chen leaned forward, her usual confident demeanor tinged with concern. "The diagnostic computer picked up something strange last week," she said. "Those high-end cars they're bringing in, they've all had their GPS systems modified, tracking devices installed. These aren't just rich guys with expensive tastes." Carlos, the youngest of the group, shifted nervously in his chair. "My cousin works at the truck stop near the highway. He says there's been talk about Los Hierros taking over local businesses, using them as fronts for their operations. They're especially interested in places that service big rigs." Danny nodded grimly. "Our location is perfect for their needs. Multiple access points to the highways, legitimate reason for trucks to stop, plenty of storage space. They're not just looking for a repair shop, they want a distribution hub." Mike's military training showed in his posture as he straightened up. "What's the play here, boss? I didn't leave Afghanistan just to give up American soil to criminals." "Do we fortify?" Danny replied, his SWAT experience kicking in, but subtly. "Sarah, I want you to upgrade our security systems, cameras, motion sensors, the works. Make it look like standard business security. Mike, start reinforcing the garage doors and storage units, but keep it looking normal. Carlos, you're our eyes and ears in town. Your family's been here for generations. People talk to you. We need to know what's being said." The team spent the day implementing their preparations while maintaining the appearance of business as usual. Danny knew they were being watched, so every move had to seem routine. Sarah installed new security cameras that were actually military-grade. Surveillance equipment from Danny's SWAT days. Mike welded additional steel plates inside the garage doors under the guise of maintenance, while Carlos spread word through his family network, quietly identifying who in town might stand with them when the time came. That evening, as Danny was finishing up paperwork, a sleek black Mercedes pulled into the lot. Two men emerged, one he recognized as a regular from the recent Cartel visits, but the other was new. Tall, well-dressed, with an air of authority that spoke of power and violence, he carried himself like someone used to being obeyed. "Señor Martinez," the man said, entering the office with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I am Javier Ortiz. My associates speak highly of your work." His English was perfect, his tone casual, but Danny recognized the predatory assessment in his gaze. "We do our best," Danny replied evenly. His hands relaxed on the desk, though his muscles were coiled with tension. 20 years of SWAT operations had taught him to recognize the moment when conversation becomes confrontation. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. "Your best, yes," Ortiz said, examining the office with exaggerated interest. "This is a fine operation you have here. Strategic location, excellent reputation, loyal staff. The kind of business that could expand with the right partnership." Danny met Ortiz's gaze steadily. "I appreciate the interest, but I'm comfortable with the size of my operation. Sometimes bigger isn't better." Ortiz's smile tightened fractionally. "In these difficult times, Señor Martinez, a business needs protection, connections. The world is changing. San Cristóbal is changing. It would be unfortunate if your shop couldn't adapt to these changes." The threat hung in the air like smoke, acrid and poisonous. Danny had faced down armed suspects, terrorists and drug lords, but this quiet conversation in his office carried a weight that pressed on his chest like a physical force. The next words out of his mouth would set an irreversible course. Danny rose slowly from his chair, his movements deliberate and controlled. 2 decades of high-pressure situations had taught him that these moments required perfect clarity. "Mr. Ortiz," he said, his voice steady, "I appreciate your concern, but I've spent 7 years building this business my way. I intend to keep running it my way." Ortiz's expression hardened, the facade of friendliness evaporating like morning dew under the Texas sun. "You misunderstand, Señor Martinez. This is not a negotiation. Los Hierros has invested considerable resources in expanding our business interests in San Cristóbal. Your cooperation is expected, not requested." "Then let me be equally clear," Danny replied, his stance shifting subtly into what his old SWAT team would have recognized as a ready position. "I don't respond well to threats. I suggest you find another shop for your expansion plans." The second man, who had remained silent by the door, moved his hand instinctively toward his waistband. Danny noted the motion without appearing to notice, his mind automatically calculating angles, distances, and response times. Habits ingrained by countless high-risk operations. Ortiz raised his hand, stopping his associate's motion. "You are making a serious mistake, my friend. We are not some small-time criminals you can dismiss. Los Hierros owns this territory now. Those who resist, well, accidents happen, shops burn, families suffer. It would be a shame if something happened to young Carlos, or perhaps Ms. Chen." The threat to his team caused something to shift in Danny's eyes, a change so subtle that most would have missed it, but Ortiz saw it and paused. For a fraction of a second, the facade of the simple mechanic cracked, and something else showed through, something hard and dangerous that spoke of violence carefully leashed. "You should leave now," Danny said quietly, "while you can." Ortiz studied him for a long moment, then smiled, a cold, calculating expression. "Very well. We will give you time to reconsider your position. 3 days, Señor Martinez. Think carefully about your choice." He turned to leave, then stopped at the door. "Oh, and do not bother going to the police. They understand their role. In the new order." After they left, Danny stood at his office window, watching the Mercedes glide out of the lot. He pulled out his phone and made a call he'd hoped he'd never have to make. "Jack, it's Danny Martinez. Remember that favor you owe me from the Dallas days? I'm calling it in." Jack Reynolds had been Danny's sergeant in SWAT and now worked as a Texas Ranger. Within an hour, he was at the shop, his weathered face grave as Danny explained the situation. "Jesus, Danny," Jack said, running a hand through his graying hair. "Los Hierros isn't like the street gangs we used to deal with. These people have paramilitary training, heavy weapons, and connections that go straight to Mexico City." "I know," Danny replied, "but this is my home, Jack. These people are my family. I can't just stand by and watch it happen." Jack nodded slowly. "Officially, my hands are tied. The department's been ordered to handle Los Hierros with kid gloves, too much political pressure from above. But unofficially." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a USB drive. "This contains everything we have on Los Hierros' operations in Texas. Personnel, locations, methods. I never gave it to you, and you never saw me today." That night, after everyone had gone home, Danny sat in his office reviewing the files. The scope of Los Hierros' operation was staggering. They weren't just pushing into San Cristóbal. They were establishing a major smuggling corridor, using legitimate businesses as cover for a massive drug and weapons trafficking operation. His phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Security upgrades complete. Added some special features you might remember from your old job." Danny smiled grimly. Sarah's technical skills went far beyond automotive diagnostics, and she'd spent the day installing a comprehensive surveillance system that would have made his old SWAT team envious. Another message came in from Mike. "Reinforcements in place. Garage is harder than it looks. Carlos says word is spreading. People are watching, waiting to see what we do." The community was waking up, realizing what was at stake. Danny walked through the darkened garage, his footsteps echoing off. Concrete walls. Each bay, each tool, each corner of this place held memories of honest work and good people. He wouldn't let it become another cartel outpost, wouldn't let them use his life's work to poison his community. In the back office, he opened a hidden panel behind his desk, a secret compartment he'd installed when he first bought the place. Inside was a reminder of his past life, his old SWAT tactical vest, modified and maintained over the years, along with specialized equipment he'd hoped never to need again. As he checked the gear methodically, muscle memory from countless operations taking over, Danny thought about the choice ahead. Ortiz would be back in 3 days, expecting submission. Instead, he would find something else entirely. A man who had spent 20 years learning how to handle exactly this kind of threat. The cartel had made a fundamental mistake. They saw a mechanic, a man with grease under his nails and tools in his hands. They should have looked closer. They should have wondered why his shop was laid out like a fortress, why his security cameras covered every angle, why his team moved with such precision and purpose. In 3 days, they would learn their error, and Danny would remind them why. SWAT officers were considered among the most dangerous opponents anyone could face. The next morning brought the first taste of what was to come. Danny arrived at the shop to find the front window shattered, glass glittering across the floor, like deadly diamonds in the early sunlight. Spray painted across the main garage door in blood-red letters was a single word: Muerte. Mike arrived minutes later, his military training evident in how he immediately began scanning rooftops and shadows. "They're watching," he said quietly, nodding toward a dark SUV parked 2 blocks away. "Been there since I turned onto the street." "Let them watch," Danny replied, his voice calm despite the anger simmering beneath. "Sarah, check the security footage from last night. Carlos, start. Cleaning up the glass. Mike, help me with the door. We open in 30 minutes, just like always." Sarah's fingers flew across her keyboard as she accessed the new security system. "Got them," she announced. 3 men, 2:30 a.m. "Wait." She leaned closer to her screen. "Danny, you need to see this." The footage showed more than just vandalism. After spraying the message, the men had placed something inside the shop through the broken window. Danny recognized the shape immediately, his SWAT experience screaming warnings in his head. "Everyone out now!" he commanded, his voice carrying the unmistakable tone of authority that had once guided teams through high-risk operations. "Mike, call the bomb squad. Tell them we have a suspected IED." They evacuated quickly and established a perimeter, turning away confused customers as the bomb squad arrived. The device turned out to be a fake, a warning rather than an attempt to do real damage. But the message was clear. The cartel was done playing games. As the bomb squad cleared out, Danny gathered his team in the back office. "They're escalating faster than expected," he said, spreading out building plans on his desk. "They won't wait 3 days. The fake bomb was a test. They're watching how we respond, how fast authorities arrive, what procedures we follow. Like probing a military base's defenses," Mike added, his expression grim. "Exactly," Danny confirmed. "Sarah, what else did you get from the footage?" She pulled up several images on her tablet. "The SUV Mike spotted, it's been driving past regularly for the past week. Different plates each time, but same vehicle. They're coordinating, getting serious." Carlos, who had been unusually quiet, spoke up. "My cousin Marco tried to warn me last night. Said some guys came by his garage, showing pictures of all of us, asking questions. They're not just targeting the shop anymore. They're gathering intel on everyone connected to it." Danny's jaw tightened. This was another familiar pattern from his SWAT days. Criminals targeting not just their primary objective, but everyone connected to it. It was a tactic designed to isolate and demoralize, to make resistance seem futile. "We need to accelerate our timeline," he decided. "Sarah, activate all the additional security measures. Mike, get the special equipment from the storage unit. Carlos, tell your family to be ready. They may need to leave town for a few days." As his team moved to their tasks, Danny's phone rang. It was Jack. "They're moving," the Texas Ranger said without preamble. "Our informants say Los Hierros is calling in muscle from across the border. Whatever they're planning, it's big." "How long?" Danny asked, already mentally adjusting his plans. 24 hours, maybe less. "Danny, they're bringing in their specialist. Guy named El Coyote. He's their cleanup man, handles problems that need to disappear completely." Danny knew the type. Every cartel had them. The ones who specialized in making examples of those who resisted. During his SWAT years, he'd seen the aftermath of their work. It wasn't just about killing. It was about sending a message that would echo through the community. After hanging up, Danny went to his hidden compartment and began preparing in earnest. His old tactical vest felt familiar against his chest as he checked each piece of equipment. In the main garage, Mike was quietly installing reinforced steel plates behind key walls, while Sarah programmed the new security system to recognize specific thermal signatures. By afternoon, the shop had transformed. To casual observers, it looked the same. A simple mechanic's garage with some broken windows being repaired. But beneath the surface, it had become a hardened position that would have made Danny's old SWAT team proud. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the lot, Danny noticed something odd. The usual stream of customers had slowed to nothing. The street outside, normally busy with local traffic, was eerily quiet. Even the regular passers-by had vanished. "They're clearing the area," he realized, his tactical mind recognizing the pattern. "Whatever's coming, they don't want witnesses." Sarah's voice crackled over their new radio system. Movement on the cameras. 3 vehicles approaching from the south, 2 from the north. Armed men inside. Danny keyed his radio, his voice steady. "All points, this is it. Remember your positions, remember your training. Most importantly, remember what we're fighting for. These bastards think they can just walk in and take what's ours. Let's show them how wrong they are." The vehicles converged on Martinez Auto Works, like sharks circling their prey. 2 black SUVs, 3 modified pickup trucks, all with tinted windows and reinforced bumpers. Danny counted at least 15 men, heavily armed, moving with the kind of coordination that spoke of paramilitary training. They positioned themselves around the building, clearly expecting to find a simple garage staffed by terrified mechanics. "Sarah, kill the main lights," Danny commanded through his radio, his voice barely above a whisper. The shop plunged into darkness, leaving only the faint glow of emergency lighting. Through his tactical goggles, retrieved from his SWAT days, Danny watched the infrared signatures of the cartel members as they approached the building. "Mike, status?" he asked, positioning himself behind a reinforced workbench. "Ready," Mike's voice crackled back. "Got eyes on 4 tangos approaching the rear entrance. They're carrying breaching equipment. Carlos, safe in the observation post. Cameras are tracking everything. Police scanner shows they've been ordered to stay clear of this area." Danny had expected as much. The cartel's influence ran deep, and tonight they were on their own. But that was fine. He'd trained for exactly these kinds of scenarios during his SWAT years. The shop's layout, which had seemed merely efficient to customers, had been designed with this possibility in mind. Every bay, every corner, every elevated position served a tactical purpose. The first attack came from the front, a breaching charge on the main garage door. The explosion echoed through the building, but the reinforced door held, barely dented by the blast. Danny allowed himself a grim smile. Those modifications Mike had installed were already paying off. "They're switching to Plan B," Sarah reported from her position in the surveillance hub. 2 teams moving to the side windows. 1 team. "Wait, movement on the roof." "Copy that," Danny replied. "Execute Pattern Delta." On his command, a series of carefully positioned flashbangs detonated around the building's perimeter. The sudden explosions of light and sound sent the first wave of attackers scrambling for cover. Through his goggles, Danny watched their heat signatures stagger and disperse. But these weren't street thugs. They recovered quickly, regrouping. With professional efficiency, a barrage of gunfire shattered the remaining windows, sending glass raining down inside the shop. Danny stayed motionless, knowing the specially installed window film would contain most of the spray. "Multiple contacts breaching east side," Mike reported, his voice tense but controlled. "Permission to engage? Granted. Defensive measures only." The sound of compressed air hissing filled the shop as the modified paint guns they'd prepared began firing. Instead of paint, they sprayed a mixture of pepper spray and UV-marked liquid. The first cartel members through the windows were met with a devastating spray that left them choking and marked for later identification. "Sir!" Carlos's voice cut through the chaos. 3 more vehicles approaching from the highway, heavy reinforcements. Danny's mind raced. They'd planned for this, but the cartel was committing more resources than expected. This wasn't just about taking over a shop anymore. This was about making an example. Through his goggles, he watched as more heat signatures appeared, surrounding the building. "Sarah, initiate Protocol 7, he ordered. Suddenly, the shop's advanced security system came to life. Every entrance was sealed by dropping steel shutters. The ventilation system reversed, creating positive pressure to keep gas attacks at bay. Most importantly, the exterior lights blazed to life, but not the normal ones. These were military-grade strobes, pulsing in a pattern designed to disorient and confuse. The cartel forces found themselves exposed in the pulsing light, their advantage of numbers temporarily neutralized by technology and preparation. But Danny knew it wouldn't last long. These men were professionals, and they'd adapt. "There, bringing up heavy weapons," Sarah warned. "RPG spotted in the third vehicle." "Time to move to phase 2, Danny replied. "Mike, get to your secondary position. Sarah, initiate the recording sequence. Carlos, signal our friends." As if on cue, the sound of multiple engines roared to life. The cartel forces suddenly found themselves caught in crosshairs as pickup. Trucks emerged from hiding spots around the neighborhood. Local business owners, farmers and workers who'd had enough of the cartel's encroachment. They weren't soldiers, but they were armed and angry, creating a second perimeter that trapped the attackers in the killing zone of light and confusion. Danny keyed his radio one more time. "Remember, people, we're not trying to kill anyone. This is about sending a message. We're not the prey they thought we were." The cartel forces found themselves in an impossible position. What should have been a simple takeover of a mechanic's shop had turned into a tactical nightmare. Their superior numbers meant nothing against an unseen enemy who had turned the entire building into a fortress and the neighborhood into an army. From his position, Danny watched the heat signatures of the cartel members shifting uncertainly. He could almost feel their confidence wavering as they realized this wasn't going to be the easy victory their leaders had promised. The real question was, would they retreat and regroup, or would pride and anger drive them to escalate further? Through his goggles, he spotted a familiar figure emerging from one of the new vehicles. Javier Ortiz, his heat signature clear, despite the chaos. The cartel lieutenant's arrival meant one thing: this night was far from over. Javier Ortiz's voice cut through the chaos, amplified by a vehicle-mounted speaker system. "Senor Martinez, you impress me, truly. But now you leave me no choice. Either you come out and negotiate, or we level this building with everyone inside." Danny watched through his tactical goggles as more cartel members took positions around the shop. Their heat signatures showed disciplined formations. These weren't just thugs with guns, but trained fighters. He counted at least 25 heavily armed men now, with more arriving. The situation was escalating beyond even his careful preparations. "Sir," Sarah's voice crackled over the radio, "thermal imaging shows they're setting up heavy weapons. Multiple RPG positions. They're not bluffing about leveling the place." "Local support is getting nervous," Carlos added from his observation post. "These aren't the kind of weapons our neighbors signed up to face." Danny keyed his radio. "All stations maintain positions. Sarah, activate the cellular jammers. Mike, status on the rear exit route?" "Clear for now," Mike responded. "But they're starting to flank around. 10 minutes, maybe less, before we're completely surrounded." Danny's mind raced through scenarios, drawing on years of SWAT experience. The cartel had the numbers and firepower to reduce the shop to rubble, but they wanted it intact. It was too valuable as a logistics hub. That gave him leverage, but not much. "Martinez!" Ortiz called out again. 3 minutes to respond, or we start shooting. Your little defensive measures won't stop what's coming." "Sarah, get me external audio," Danny commanded. When she confirmed the system was live, he spoke, his voice echoing across the parking lot. "Mr. Ortiz, you're investing a lot of resources into taking a simple mechanic's shop. Makes me wonder what your bosses would think about all this attention you're drawing. Lot of witnesses, lot of cameras recording everything." There was a pause, and Danny could see Ortiz's heat signature shift as the man considered his words. The cartel lieutenant was ambitious, but not stupid. He had to know that a prolonged firefight would attract unwanted attention, no matter how many local cops were on the payroll. "Perhaps we can reach an arrangement," Ortiz replied, his tone measured. "A compromise that benefits us both." "I'm listening," Danny responded, though he kept his rifle trained on the cartel leader's position. "You have skills we can use, Martinez. Your setup here, it shows experience, training, the kind of expertise Los Hierros values. Join us. Your shop becomes a legitimate partner in our enterprise, and you become a wealthy man." Danny's finger tensed on his rifle's trigger. Through his scope, he could take the shot right now, end this before it got worse. But he'd seen enough cartel operations to know that killing Ortiz would only ensure a bloodbath. The cartel would send someone worse, someone with orders to make an example of everyone involved. "Your offer is generous," Danny replied, playing for time as he watched more heat signatures moving into position around the building. "But I need assurances, guarantees for my people, for this community." "Of course," Ortiz said smoothly. "We are businessmen, after all. Come out, we discuss terms face to face, like professionals." "Sir," Sarah's voice cut in urgently on their private channel. "Multiple vehicles approaching from the highway, different heat signatures from the cartel forces, bigger engines, military-grade hardware." Danny's heart sank. He recognized what was coming. Los Hierros was bringing in their heavy hitters, the kind of firepower that would turn this standoff into a slaughter. "All stations, prepare for fallback," he ordered quietly. "Mike, get the charges ready. Sarah, start wiping the systems. Carlos, tell our neighbors to disperse, now." But before anyone could move, a new voice crackled over their radio, one that made Danny freeze in place. "This is Texas Ranger Jack Reynolds to all units. We have multiple reports of armed conflict and domestic terrorism in progress. All cartel forces are ordered to stand down immediately. Federal tactical teams are inbound. ETA, 3 minutes. Through his goggles, Danny watched the cartel members' heat signatures shift nervously. Ortiz was gesturing frantically, clearly, not having expected this development. The sound of approaching helicopters filled the air. "You think this changes anything?" Ortiz shouted, his composed demeanor cracking. "The Rangers can't be here all the time, Martinez. We'll withdraw for now, but this isn't over. You've just made it personal." Danny watched as the cartel forces began a tactical retreat, their movements still disciplined, despite the chaos. Within minutes, their vehicles were peeling away into the darkness, leaving only brass casings and the acrid smell of gun smoke behind. As police sirens approached, Danny gathered his team in the back office. "This was just round 1, he said, grimly. "They'll be back, and next time they won't bother with warnings or negotiations. We've shown our hand. Now they know what they're dealing with." "So what's the play?" Mike asked, checking the magazine in his rifle. "We prepare," Danny replied, his mind already formulating plans. "They'll expect us to rely on police protection now, to let our guard down. Instead, we're going to give them a lesson in why you don't back a SWAT officer into a corner. Sarah, contact our friends in the neighborhood. Mike, we're going to need more supplies. Carlos, it's time to call in every favor your family has in town. This isn't just about protecting the shop anymore. We're taking the fight to them." The next morning, Martinez Auto Works looked more like a war zone than a mechanic's shop. Bullet holes pockmarked the walls, broken glass littered the ground, and the acrid smell of smoke still hung in the air. Texas Rangers and FBI agents swarmed the scene, documenting evidence and taking statements, but Danny knew their presence was temporary, a band-aid on a bullet wound. Jack Reynolds pulled Danny aside as forensics teams combed through the debris. "You're lucky I had surveillance teams in place," the ranger said, his voice low. "But I can't keep them here forever. The brass is already talking about resource allocation and jurisdictional priorities." "How long?" Danny asked, watching as agents photographed the damage. 3 days, maybe 4. After that, you're back to relying on local law enforcement." Jack's expression darkened, "and we both know how reliable that'll be." Danny nodded grimly. The local police were either on the cartel's payroll or too scared to act. Once the Rangers pulled out, Los Hierros would be back, and they'd be out for blood. Inside the shop, Sarah was running diagnostics on their security systems, while Mike and Carlos cleared debris. The night's battle had proven their preparations effective, but also revealed vulnerabilities they needed to address. Their next move will be bigger. Danny addressed his team once the law enforcement officers had moved outside. They'll bring in specialists, heavy weapons, maybe even corrupt federal agents. We need to be ready for anything. I've been monitoring their communications, Sarah reported, pulling up data on her tablet. They're calling in favors, moving assets. Something big is brewing across the border. Mike, who had been unusually quiet, spoke up. I made some calls. To old army buddies. Got some intel you need to hear, boss. The guy they're bringing in, El Coyote, he's not just any cartel enforcer. He's ex-Mexican special forces trained by Israeli contractors. Specializes in making problems disappear. Completely. My cousin Marco sent word, Carlos added. Cartel's offering serious money for information about our operation. They're watching everything, our homes, our families, our routines. Danny absorbed the information, his tactical mind already formulating plans. Then we changed the game. They're expecting us to turtle up, to play defense. Instead, we're going to hit them where it hurts. He spread out a map of the area on his workbench, pointing to several locations. Sarah, your surveillance picked up their vehicle patterns, right? Show me their likely staging areas. Sarah overlaid thermal imaging data onto the map, revealing hotspots of cartel activity. They're using these 3 warehouses as distribution hubs, she explained. Heavy traffic at night, minimal security during the day. They think nobody's watching. Perfect, Danny said, his expression hardening. Mike, remember that demo training from your army days? Time to put it to use. We're going to rig those warehouses with surprises. Not to destroy them, just to send a message. What about El Coyote? Carlos asked nervously. He's going to come for us personally. Count on it, Danny replied. But that's part of the plan. He's used to being the hunter. Let's see how he handles being the prey. As they discussed strategy, Danny's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. The message was simple. A photo of his house, taken that morning, with his sister's car in the driveway. She had been visiting with his niece, something the cartel had obviously noticed. Danny's jaw tightened. Sarah, initiate Protocol 9. Get our families out of town now. Use the safe houses we prepared. Already on it, she responded, fingers flying over her keyboard. I've got transport arranged and clean phones ready. The team worked through the day, fortifying their positions while appearing to conduct normal business. To any observers, it looked like they were simply repairing damage from the previous night's attack. But beneath the surface, they were preparing, and for war. Danny spent the afternoon training his team in advanced tactical movements. Mike already had military experience, but Sarah and Carlos needed to learn basic combat maneuvers. They practiced room clearing, communication protocols, and emergency procedures until the movements became muscle memory. As evening approached, Jack returned with more news. Just intercepted cartel communications, he said, handing Danny a file. El Coyote crossed the border an hour ago. He's brought a team with him, all ex-military, all highly trained. This isn't going to be like last night's fight. Danny reviewed the intelligence, his expression grim. The photos showed serious professional operators, armed with military-grade weapons and equipment. These weren't common cartel thugs. They were apex predators. How long until they move? He asked. Intelligence suggests they'll spend a few days doing reconnaissance, Jack replied. El Coyote's methodical. He'll study every angle, identify every weakness before he strikes. Good, Danny said, surprising everyone. That gives us time to set the stage. They think they're dealing with a stubborn mechanic and a few loyal employees. time to show them they're up against something far more dangerous." He turned to his team, his voice carrying the authority that had once led SWAT operations. "Tomorrow, we start hitting their infrastructure. Small strikes, carefully planned. We'll keep them off balance, make them waste resources chasing shadows. By the time El Coyote makes his move, Los Hierros will be bleeding from 100 cuts." The sun set over San Cristóbal, casting long shadows across the bullet-scarred shop. Danny stood at his office window, watching the light fade. In the distance, he could see the cartel's vehicles moving through town, their presence both a threat and a challenge. The real war was about to begin, and he intended to fight it on his terms. The first strike against Los Hierros came at midnight. Danny and Mike moved like shadows through the industrial district, their movements precise and calculated. Their target was a seemingly abandoned warehouse that Sarah's surveillance had identified as a major cartel distribution hub. "Security is light," Mike whispered, scanning the building through thermal optics. 2 guards at the main entrance, one roaming the perimeter, just like Sarah's intel said. Danny nodded, checking his watch. In exactly 3 minutes, a pre-programmed disruption to the area's power grid, courtesy of Sarah's hacking skills, would plunge the district into darkness. The backup generators would kick in, but that momentary darkness was all they needed. "Remember," Danny murmured, "we're not here to kill anyone. This is about sending a message and gathering intel." Right on schedule, the lights died. In the sudden darkness, Danny and Mike moved swiftly, deploying specialized gas canisters, military-grade CS gas mixed with a unique UV-reactive chemical marker. Anyone caught in the gas would be tagged for future identification, invisible to the naked eye, but glowing bright under ultraviolet light. The guards' shouts of confusion turned to coughs and curses as the gas spread. Through their tactical masks, Danny and Mike entered the warehouse. The interior was exactly what they expected. Rows of crates and packages, carefully organized for distribution. But they weren't here for the drugs. Mike quickly planted small charges at key structural points, while Danny photographed documents and shipping manifests. The charges weren't meant to destroy the building, just to create enough controlled damage to disrupt operations and send a message. "Boss," Mike's voice crackled through their secure radio, "you need to see this." In a back office, Mike had discovered something unexpected, a wall of surveillance photos, images of local businesses, police officers, politicians, and, among them, detailed photos of Martinez Auto Works and its employees. The cartel's intelligence gathering was more extensive than they'd realized. "Download everything," Danny ordered, connecting a specialized drive to the office computer. "Sarah can analyze it later." They were almost finished when Sarah's voice cut through their radios. "Multiple vehicles approaching fast from the south. Looks like someone tipped them off." Danny's mind raced through contingencies. This was earlier than expected, but they'd planned for it. "Execute pattern echo," he commanded. "Mike, charges set, armed and ready. Sarah, initiate the diversion." 2 miles away, a series of explosions rocked another warehouse district. Harmless pyrotechnics designed to draw attention and resources. Through their tactical goggles, Danny and Mike watched as most of the approaching vehicles diverted toward the larger disturbance. They exited the warehouse the way they'd entered, leaving behind more than just explosive charges. Hidden cameras, electronic trackers, and data interceptors were now in place, turning the cartel's distribution hub into an unwitting source of intelligence. As they reached their exit vehicle, a nondescript utility van, the first detonation sequence began. Carefully placed charges blew out specific support structures, causing partial collapses that would take weeks to repair. The UV-marked guards stumbled out, coughing and disoriented, as sections of their warehouse crumbled behind them. Phase 1 complete, Danny reported as they drove away, mixing with the sparse late-night traffic. Sarah, start monitoring emergency and channels. Let's see how they react. Back at the shop, Carlos had transformed their back office into a temporary command center. Multiple screens showed surveillance feeds from across San Cristóbal, tracking cartel movements and police response. Patterns. They're scrambling, Sarah reported, monitoring communications. Lot of chatter about heightened security at other locations. They didn't expect to be hit like this. Danny studied the feeds. The cartel's response would tell them a lot about their organization and procedures. Already, he could see patterns emerging in how they deployed reinforcements and secured other assets. "Sir," Carlos called out, "got something from my cousin. El Coyote's team has been asking questions around town. They're building detailed profiles on all of us. Habits, routines, weaknesses. Let them," Danny replied, his voice hard. "Every minute they spend investigating us is a minute we can use to hit them harder." The next phase of their plan was already in motion. Sarah had used the computer access from the warehouse to plant digital Trojans in the cartel's communication network. Mike's military contacts were providing intelligence on cross-border movements. Even Carlos's extensive family network was proving invaluable, feeding them information about cartel activities in town. "They'll retaliate," Mike said, cleaning his gear with practiced efficiency. "Probably go after our families first." "Already handled," Danny assured him. "Our families are safe in locations even I don't know." Sarah set it up. Compartmentalized information. No one person knows everything. As if to emphasize the point, Danny's phone buzzed with an alert. Sarah had detected increased cartel activity around their known residences. They were too late. The houses were empty, their occupants long gone, with false trails leading in multiple directions. "Tomorrow we hit the second warehouse," Danny announced, marking positions on their tactical map. "They'll be expecting it now, so we change the pattern. Instead of night, we go at peak business hours. Instead of stealth, we go loud." "That's risky," Mike cautioned. "Lot of potential civilian exposure." "Which is exactly why they won't expect it," Danny explained. "They think we're trying to stay under the radar. Time to show them how wrong they are. Sarah, start feeding false intelligence through their compromised channels. Let's make them think we're planning something completely different." The team worked through the night, preparing for the next strike. Each operation would become progressively bolder, designed not just to damage the cartel's operations, but to destroy their sense of security. Danny knew they were playing a dangerous game, but he'd learned long ago that sometimes the best defense was a devastating offense. The cartel's response came swifter and more brutally than even Danny had anticipated. The morning after their warehouse raid, 3 local business owners who had supported Martinez Auto Works were found beaten in their shops. Each victim had been left with a message carved into their shop's walls: "El Coyote viene, the coyote comes." Danny stood in the last vandalized shop, a small grocery store owned by Carlos's uncle, his jaw tight with controlled anger. The owner, though bruised, remained defiant. "They think they can scare us," the old man said, wiping blood from his lip, "but we've lived under their shadow too long. Better to die standing than live on our knees." "No one's dying," Danny assured him, though his mind was already calculating adjusted risk factors. El Coyote was sending a message, but he was also revealing his tactical approach. Systematic, psychological, escalating pressure designed to isolate targets from their support network. Back at the shop, Sarah had made a breakthrough in analyzing the data they'd stolen. "They're not just running drugs," she reported, spreading documents across the workbench. "These shipping manifests show weapons, stolen cars, even human trafficking. San Cristóbal isn't just a waypoint. They're planning to turn it into a major hub for their entire operation." "That explains the resources they're committing," Mike added, studying the documents. My contacts say they've pulled operators from 3 other states for this. El Coyote never travels with less than a dozen men, all ex-military or special forces. They're treating this like a full military operation. Danny's radio crackled. Carlos, watching from his observation post near the highway. Movement at the south checkpoint. 4 SUVs coming in, definitely Cartel. Wait, there's something else. Big truck, car carrier type, but the dimensions are wrong. They're bringing in heavy weapons, Danny concluded. Sarah, access the traffic cameras. Track those vehicles. The team watched as Sarah's screens showed the convoy moving through town. The SUVs were typical Cartel vehicles, but the truck was something else. Custom modified, probably armored, with suspicious modifications under its frame. I've seen that setup before, Mike said grimly. In Afghanistan, their mobile weapon platforms, usually mounted with heavy machine guns or even anti-tank weapons. They're preparing for urban warfare. Danny's phone buzzed, a message from Jack Reynolds. El Coyote made contact with corrupt cops. They're planning to hit you. With law enforcement cover. Be ready. They're changing the game, Danny told his team. We've hurt them enough that they're bringing in their heavy hitters, but they're also trying to do this legally, using compromised cops to give them official cover. So what's our play? Sarah asked, her fingers hovering over her keyboard. We accelerate, Danny replied, moving to the tactical map. They expect us to go defensive again, strengthen our position here. Instead, we're going to hit them harder. Like those charges you planted at the first warehouse, trigger them now. Across town, explosions rocked the cartel's distribution center. Not the controlled demolitions they'd planned, but full detonations that turned the building into a smoking ruin. The message was clear. Escalation would be met with escalation. Sarah, release the first data packet to your journalist contacts. Carlos, tell your family to activate the community response network. Mike, get our heavy gear ready. They want to play rough? Let's show them what a SWAT veteran can really do. The team mobilized with practiced efficiency. Sarah began feeding selected cartel data to key media outlets, exposing corruption and criminal activities. Carlos's extensive family network spread word through the community, coordinating resistance and gathering intelligence. Mike prepared their enhanced tactical gear, equipment that would have been at home in Danny's SWAT days. But El Coyote proved why he had such a fearsome reputation. Within hours, the cartel's counterattack began, not with violence, but with precision strikes at their support network. Bank accounts were frozen. Utilities to friendly businesses were cut. Police began harassing anyone connected to Martinez Auto Works. They're trying to strangle us slowly, Sarah observed, tracking the pattern of attacks. Cut off our resources, isolate us, then move in for the kill. Classic siege tactics, Danny agreed. But they've made a crucial mistake. They think we're just defending the shop. They don't realize we've been preparing for something much bigger. He moved to the hidden compartment behind his office wall, pulling out not just tactical gear, but documents, detailed plans and contingencies he'd spent years developing. Remember how I said I chose this location carefully? He asked his team. The shop was never the real fortress. This entire neighborhood, the layout, the businesses, the sight lines, I helped design it all. Back in my SWAT days, we used to plan defensible zones in urban areas. When I retired here, I put those plans into action, building relationships, suggesting renovations, creating a kill zone they'll never see coming. The whole neighborhood is a trap, Mike realized, understanding dawning on his face. Exactly, Danny confirmed, and El Coyote just walked right into it. Now we just have to make him dance to our tune. He spread out a detailed overlay of the neighborhood, showing hidden defensive positions, pre-planned escape routes, and interlocking fields of fire. El Coyote thinks he's hunting us. Time to show him what it feels like to be the prey. El Coyote's first direct move came at dawn. Danny watched through his tactical scope as teams of armed men took up positions around the neighborhood, not just cartel soldiers, but corrupt local law enforcement as well. They were setting up for a coordinated assault under the guise of a legitimate police operation. "I count 12 marksmen on the rooftops," Mike reported from his observation post. "Another 20+ on the ground. Mix of cartel gunmen and cops. They're not even trying to hide it anymore." Sarah's voice crackled over their secure channel. "Police bands are active. They're calling it a drug raid, claiming they have evidence of trafficking through the auto shop. News vans are already setting up outside their perimeter." "Perfect," Danny replied, a grim smile crossing his face. "Carlos, is your cousin's news crew in position?" "Yes, sir. They're live streaming everything, just like we planned. The whole world's about to see what really happens in San Cristóbal." Danny had anticipated this move. El Coyote was known for using overwhelming force while maintaining a veneer of legitimacy. The presence of news crews was meant to pressure Danny's team into surrendering quietly, avoiding a public bloodbath. Instead, it would serve as witness to the cartel's corruption. "Sarah, activate Protocol Omega. Mike, get ready to light up. The welcome party." Across the neighborhood, hidden systems came to life. Every security camera, every modified sensor, every concealed defensive position that Danny had spent years preparing, all activated under Sarah's control. The entire zone became a networked battlefield, feeding real-time data to their command center. A police captain with cartel ties stepped forward with a bullhorn. "Daniel Martinez, this is the San Cristóbal Police Department. We have a warrant to search these premises for illegal substances. Come out with your hands up." Danny keyed his external speakers, his voice echoing across the street. "Captain Ramirez, before you continue this charade, you might want to check your phone." "Sarah." At his signal, Sarah released their first data package. Every officer on scene received text messages containing proof of their corruption, bank records, photographs, recorded conversations. Simultaneous broadcasts went out to state and federal law enforcement agencies, exposing the depth of cartel infiltration. The effect was immediate. Several officers lowered their weapons, uncertain now that their corruption was exposed. Others doubled down, revealing their true allegiance to the cartel. The neat police operation dissolved into chaos. That's when El Coyote made his appearance. He stepped out of an armored SUV, his presence commanding immediate attention. Unlike the flashy cartel lieutenants, he dressed practically in tactical gear, moving with the measured precision of a professional killer. "Impressive setup, Martinez," El Coyote called out, his accent slight but noticeable. "Using our own corruption against us. But you forget, we don't need these police anymore. You forced our hand, made us go loud. Now we do this the hard way." On his signal, the cartel forces shed all pretense of a police operation. Military-grade weapons appeared from hidden compartments in their vehicles. The corrupt officers, who remained merged seamlessly with the cartel units, forming professional fire teams. "Last chance, Martinez," El Coyote announced. "Surrender now and your people walk away. Resist and nobody leaves this neighborhood alive." Danny watched through his scope as more cartel vehicles moved into position, including the modified truck they'd spotted earlier. Its sides dropped down, revealing mounted heavy weapons, just as Mike had predicted. "You know what amazes me?" Danny replied through the speakers, his voice calm. "You people never learn. You think because you have the numbers, the weapons, the ruthlessness, that you can just take whatever you want, but you forget something crucial." "And what's that?" El Coyote asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "You're not the only ones who know how to fight. Zara initiates street defense protocols. Mike, weapons free on the heavy units. Carlos, signal the neighborhood." The trap was sprung. Hydraulic barriers erupted from the streets, cutting off vehicle access. Hidden panels in buildings slid away, revealing defensive positions manned by community members who'd been waiting for this moment. Every exit route the cartel had planned to use was suddenly blocked or covered by overlapping fields of fire. "You see, while you were watching us," Danny continued, "mapping our routines, planning your assault, we were doing something much more important. We were teaching this community how to fight back. Sarah, show them what they're really facing." Spotlights blazed to life, illuminating dozens of armed citizens in protected positions, shop owners, farmers, workers, all trained by Danny and Mike over the past weeks. The cartel forces found themselves caught in the kill zone Danny had spent years preparing. El Coyote's response was immediate and professional. "Heavy weapons, open fire! Breach teams, move in! I want that shop reduced to rubble!" The neighborhood erupted in gunfire as the final battle for San Cristóbal began. Danny had known it would come to this, a decisive confrontation between a community fighting for its freedom and a criminal army determined to crush all resistance. The only question now was who would be left standing when the smoke cleared. The battle for San Cristóbal exploded into chaos as El Coyote's forces launched their assault. The cartel's heavy weapons opened up first, their mounted machine guns sending streams of bullets into defensive positions. The modified truck's side panels dropped completely, revealing not just machine guns, but a vehicle-mounted mortar system. "Multiple breaching teams moving in from the north and east," Sarah reported, her fingers flying across keyboards as she coordinated their defense through the surveillance network. "They're using professional tactics, leapfrogging coverage, smoke grenades for concealment." Danny had expected nothing less from El Coyote's men. These weren't ordinary cartel soldiers. They were trained specialists who had fought in actual wars. But Danny had spent his SWAT career studying exactly how to counter such tactics. "Mike, initiate sequence Delta," he commanded. "Carlos, tell your people to hold positions until my mark." Throughout the neighborhood, carefully concealed defense systems activated. The first cartel breaching team, moving confidently through smoke coverage, suddenly found themselves caught in a brutal crossfire. Hidden pneumatic launchers in the buildings sprayed them with rubber bullets and paint markers, temporarily blinding their tactical goggles. "They're adapting," Mike warned. "Second wave is using riot shields, pushing through the defensive fire." El Coyote's voice boomed across the battlefield. "You can't hold forever, Martinez. I've got 30 more men coming in from the highway. Your little community army won't last an hour." He was right about the reinforcements. Sarah's drones had spotted 3 more vehicles racing toward town, but Danny had planned for this too. "Jack, you're clear to move," he transmitted on a separate channel. Suddenly, the approaching cartel reinforcements found their path blocked by Texas Ranger vehicles that seemed to appear from nowhere. Jack Reynolds had positioned his teams precisely where Danny had suggested, waiting for exactly this moment. "Focus on the forces already engaged," Danny ordered his team. "The Rangers will handle the reinforcements. Sarah, start the next phase." The battle shifted as Sarah activated more of their prepared defenses. Fire sprinklers in surrounding buildings activated, but instead of water, they sprayed a mixture that made the ground treacherously slippery. Strategic alleyways were filled with dense smoke, channeling the attackers into prepared kill zones. El Coyote proved his reputation was well earned. Adapting quickly to the changing battlefield, he reorganized his forces into smaller, more mobile units. "Target their surveillance," he commanded. "Find their cameras, their sensors. Blind them." Cartel marksmen began picking off the visible security cameras, not realizing that most of them were decoys. The real surveillance network was hidden in seemingly innocent fixtures. Streetlights, store signs, even old air conditioning units. "They're starting to hit our people," Carlos reported tensely. 3 wounded at the north barricade. They need medical extraction. Route them through passage, Charlie, Danny replied. Mike, provide covering fire. Sarah, activate the emergency strobes in Sector 4. The neighborhood's defended zones had been designed with multiple fallback positions and hidden evacuation routes. As the wounded defenders fell back, intense strobe lights and disorienting sound systems activated, making accurate targeting nearly impossible for the attackers. But El Coyote had one more card to play. Bring up the demolition charger, he ordered. If we can't take the shop, we'll bury it. Danny watched through his tactical scope as cartel operators began placing shaped charges on key buildings. They were planning to bring down entire structures, destroying the neighborhood's defensive network. Sarah, are the structural reinforcements in place? Affirmative. All critical buildings were strengthened months ago. But, sir, they're not just targeting defensive positions anymore. They're going after civilian buildings too. Danny's jaw tightened. El Coyote was escalating beyond tactical necessity, moving into pure terrorism. The cartel commander was sending a message. Resist us, and we'll destroy everything you love. All units, switch to live ammunition, Danny commanded, his voice hard. They've crossed the line. No more rubber bullets, no more playing nice. Show them what happens when they threaten our homes. The change in defensive fire was immediate and devastating. Cartel forces that had grown bold under ineffective fire suddenly found themselves facing legitimate threats. The community defenders, many of them military veterans or experienced hunters, now engaged with deadly precision. El Coyote, recognizing the shift, quickly moved to a protected position. You're making this personal, Martinez, he shouted. Remember, you chose this. Everything that happens now is on your head. You're wrong, Danny replied through the external speakers. This became personal when you threatened innocent people, when you decided to corrupt our police, terrorize our businesses, and destroy our homes. Now you get to learn what happens when you push American citizens too far. The battle had reached its turning point. El Coyote's forces were caught between determined community defenders and approaching Texas Rangers. Their superior numbers meant little in the constrained urban environment where every angle was covered, every escape route blocked. Sir, Sarah's voice carried urgent warning, thermal imaging shows they're placing their largest charges near the gas lines. If they detonate those... Danny understood immediately. El Coyote wasn't just planning to destroy buildings. He was going to try to take out the entire block. The resulting explosion and fire would devastate San Cristóbal's heart. Time seemed to slow as Danny processed the threat. The gas line charges weren't just another tactical move. They were El Coyote's insurance policy. If he couldn't win, he'd make sure there was nothing left to save. Mike, get to the south position now, Danny ordered, already moving. Sarah, kill the gas to the entire block. Carlos, begin emergency evacuation of all civilians through the tunnel network. This ends now. Danny grabbed his specialized tactical gear, equipment he hadn't touched since his most dangerous SWAT operations. The weight of the armor felt familiar, like greeting an old friend. His custom-modified rifle, maintained meticulously over the years, was loaded with match-grade ammunition. Sir, Sarah's voice crackled with urgency, I've shut down most of the gas flow, but they've already breached one of the main lines. They're rigging it for maximum damage. We've got maybe 10 minutes before they're ready to detonate. Through the surveillance network, Danny watched El Coyote directing his men with cold efficiency. The cartel commander had positioned his forces to cover all apparent approaches to the gas line charges. It was exactly what Danny would have done in his position, which meant he also knew the one weakness in the strategy. Mike, status on the underground access? Ready, Mike replied. But sir, they've got motion sensors covering the maintenance tunnels the moment we try to approach. They're expecting a team, Danny cut in. They're not expecting one man who knows every inch of this territory. Sarah, Initiate pattern Sigma, full spectrum electronic warfare. Give me 60 seconds of sensor blackout. That'll burn out most of our defensive systems, Sarah warned. We'll be operating blind too. Sometimes you have to be willing to sacrifice your queen to checkmate the king, Danny responded, already moving toward the hidden access panel that led to the maintenance tunnels. Carlos, your people need to keep up suppressing fire. Make them think we're still fighting for positions above ground. The tunnel system beneath San Cristóbal was a maze of utility passages and old storm drains. Danny had mapped every inch of it over the years, adding his own modifications and emergency exits. Now, moving through the darkness with practiced ease, he could hear the muffled sounds of battle above. Sarah's voice came through his earpiece. Electronic warfare package ready. On your mark. Danny reached the access point nearest the gas. Line charges. Above him, he could hear El Coyote's men moving into final positions. They were professionals, but they were fighting on his territory. Execute Sigma, he ordered. Suddenly, every electronic system in a 4-block radius went haywire. Sensors sparked and died, communication devices erupted in static, and even tactical goggles flickered into uselessness. In the chaos, Danny emerged from the tunnel like a ghost. The first cartel operator never saw him coming. A quick strike to the base of the skull, and the man dropped silently. The second turned just in time to catch Danny's knife in his tactical vest's gap, not a killing blow, but enough to incapacitate. Movement at the main charge, one of El Coyote's men shouted through the electronic chaos. Contact, The man's warning cut off as Danny's rifle cracked once, twice, 3 times. Precision shots, just like his SWAT training, incapacitating. Wounds to shoulders and legs. These men were criminals, but Danny hadn't spent 20 years in law enforcement to become a killer. Then El Coyote himself appeared, moving with the fluid grace of a trained operator. Impressive, he said, his rifle trained on Danny's position. You're everything your file suggested, Martinez. Former SWAT, decorated officer, expert in urban warfare. But you made one mistake. And what's that? Danny asked, equally motionless, his own weapon ready. You think this is about your shop, your town. It's not. This is about sending a message. No one resists Los Hierros. Even if I die here, they'll send others. They'll keep coming until everything you love is ash. You're wrong, Danny replied. This was never just about defending my shop. This was about showing people they don't have to live in fear. Every person you threatened, every business you tried to intimidate, they're watching right now, and they're seeing that you're not invincible. El Coyote's smile was cold. Noble sentiment. Let's see how it holds up when this entire block goes up in flames. His free hand moved toward the detonator on his vest. Time slowed again. Danny saw everything with crystal clarity. The distance between them, the angle of El Coyote's weapon, the micro-expressions that telegraphed his next move. 2 decades of SWAT operations had prepared him for exactly this moment. The 2 men moved simultaneously. El Coyote's finger tightened on his trigger as his other hand reached for the detonator. But Danny had already begun his motion, performing, a technique he'd practiced thousands of times in training. His rifle barked once, with surgical precision. El Coyote's detonator clattered to the ground, a precision shot having shattered it in his hand. Before he could react, a second round struck his shoulder, spinning him around and sending his rifle flying. The cartel commander stumbled but remained standing, his training evident in how quickly he regained his balance. You could have taken the kill shot, El Coyote said, blood seeping through his tactical gear. His voice carried a mix of pain and professional respect. I'm not a cartel executioner, Danny replied, keeping his rifle trained on his opponent. I'm a law enforcement officer. 20 years of SWAT taught me that there's a difference between stopping a threat and murder. Around them, the battle was shifting dramatically. The Texas Rangers, led by Jack Reynolds, had broken through the cartel's outer defenses. The sound of gunfire was becoming sporadic as more of El Coyote's men realized their position was untenable. "Sir!" Sarah's voice cracked through the radio. "Cartel forces are surrendering across the neighborhood, but we've got a problem. Their heavy weapons team is making a last stand at the north barricade. They're threatening to detonate their remaining explosives." El Coyote's laugh was harsh. "You see, even if you take me down, my men will ensure this victory costs you everything. That's the difference between us, Martinez. You're still playing by rules. We'll burn it all down before we accept defeat." Danny's response was to key his radio. "Mike, execute contingency 7. Suddenly, the north barricade erupted in chaos. Mike had positioned specialized launchers weeks ago, hidden in abandoned cars and behind false walls. Now they activated, filling the air with a devastating combination of tear gas and rubber projectiles. The cartel's heavy weapons team, caught completely by surprise, found themselves unable to maintain their positions. "Check your men's body cameras," Danny told El Coyote. "Watch what's happening right now." Through their tactical network, they could see the scene unfolding. The community members Danny had trained weren't just fighting back. They were systematically dismantling the cartel's remaining forces, using precise, coordinated tactics. Shopkeepers, mechanics, farmers, ordinary people who had been transformed into an effective fighting force. "Impossible," El Coyote muttered, watching his carefully planned operation crumble. "These are just civilians. We had superior numbers, training, equipment." "You had mercenaries fighting for money," Danny corrected him. "We had people fighting for their homes, their families, their future. I just showed them how to channel that motivation effectively." Texas Ranger vehicles were now flooding into the neighborhood. Jack Reynolds' voice boomed through loudspeakers, demanding the remaining cartel forces surrender. More importantly, news helicopters circled overhead, broadcasting everything live. There would be no covering this up, no corrupt officials able to make it disappear. "Carlos," Danny called through his radio. "Status report. All civilian evacuations complete." "Sir, no casualties in the tunnel system. Sarah's got video evidence of everything. The corrupt cops, the cartel operations, all of it. It's already spreading across social media and news networks." El Coyote's expression shifted as he realized the full scope of his defeat. This wasn't just a tactical loss. It was a complete strategic failure. Los Hierros' entire operation in San Cristóbal had been exposed, their methods documented, their corrupt allies revealed. "You don't understand what you've done," El Coyote said, his voice low and dangerous. "The cartel will send others. They'll keep coming until they realize the cost is too high," Danny interrupted. "Look around you. Every move you made was documented. Every corrupt officer you bought is now exposed. The entire country is watching San Cristóbal right now, seeing how a community can stand up to cartels and win." Sarah's voice confirmed it. "Sir, the footage is going viral. State police are moving to arrest marked corrupt officers across 3 counties. FBI's anti-corruption task force is mobilizing. Even Mexican authorities are distancing themselves from Los Hierros after seeing the evidence." The sound of approaching footsteps made both men turn. Jack Reynolds led a team of Texas Rangers into the area, their weapons ready but held carefully. The Ranger commander took in the scene, Danny standing over the wounded El Coyote, the disabled explosives, the evidence of the intense fight. "Like old times, Danny?" Jack asked, a hint of their long friendship showing through his professional demeanor. "Better," Danny replied. "This time, we're not just making an arrest. We're showing people they don't have to live in fear." As the Rangers took El Coyote into custody, Danny looked around at what his garage had become. The building was scarred by bullet holes and explosive damage, but it was still standing. More importantly, the community around it had been transformed. Where there had once been fear and submission, there was now strength and unity. Mike approached, his tactical gear showing signs of the intense fight. "Sir, we're getting reports from other towns. They're watching what happened here. People are organizing, sharing information about cartel activities. This isn't just a victory for San Cristóbal." Danny nodded, finally lowering his rifle. The battle was over, but its impact was just beginning. In trying to make an example of one stubborn mechanic, the cartel had instead created a template for resistance that would spread far beyond this small Texas town. The days following the battle for San Cristóbal brought changes nobody could have predicted. Local and national media descended on the town, transforming the quiet streets into a circus of news vans and reporters. Everyone wanted to hear about the mechanic who had outmaneuvered one of Mexico's most feared cartels. Danny watched from his office as FBI evidence teams combed through the aftermath. The shop's walls were riddled with bullet holes, its windows shattered, but the structure itself remained solid, much like the community it served. Teams of workers were already beginning repairs, local volunteers working alongside professional contractors. "You're going to want to see this," Sarah called from her computer station. She had transformed their surveillance center into a command post for managing the aftermath. El Coyote's interrogation is yielding results. The FBI's anti-cartel task force is moving on locations across 3 states. Mike entered the office, his tablet displaying real-time updates from law enforcement channels. "It's not just here. Other communities are starting to push back. Our security footage showing how we defended the neighborhood has gone viral. People are organizing neighborhood watches, sharing intel about cartel activities." "That's what they never understood," Danny said, examining the battle damage to his beloved shop. "They thought fear was their greatest weapon. Instead, it became their biggest weakness. Once people saw they could fight back effectively, that fear turned into determination." Carlos burst in, excitement clear on his face. "You need to come. Outside, boss. Something's happening in town." They emerged to find the streets filled with people, not reporters or federal agents, but ordinary citizens, shop owners, farmers, mechanics, families with children. Many carried tools and building materials. As Danny watched, they began working on the damaged buildings, clearing debris and repairing what the battle had destroyed. "They've been organizing this all morning," Carlos explained. "My uncle says every business in town wants to help rebuild. They're calling it the San Cristóbal Restoration Project." Jack Reynolds arrived as the community effort was in full swing. The Texas Ranger commander looked tired but satisfied. "Just got word from the federal prosecutor," he reported. "They're using RICO statutes against the entire Los Hierros network. Your evidence, combined with El Coyote's cooperation, has given them everything they need." "What about the corrupt officers?" Danny asked, thinking of all the law enforcement personnel who had aided the cartel. "Internal Affairs is having a field day," Jack replied with a grim smile. 37 arrests so far, including 2 judges and a district attorney. Sarah's data dumps left nowhere for them to hide. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of several official-looking vehicles. A delegation of state and federal law enforcement officials had arrived to assess the situation. Among them was the FBI's Assistant Director of Criminal Enterprises. "Mr. Martinez," the Assistant Director began, extending his hand. "I have to admit, when I first heard about a mechanic taking on a cartel, I was skeptical. But what you've accomplished here, it's unprecedented. You've created a template for community-based resistance that could change how we approach cartel operations in border towns." Danny accepted the handshake but remained modest. "I just showed them what I learned in SWAT, that proper training, coordination, and community support can overcome any threat. These people did the real work. They chose to stand up rather than back down." Throughout the day, more evidence of the battle's broader impact emerged. Sarah monitored social media and news reports showing similar movements starting in other border towns. Communities were sharing information, organizing defense networks, and cooperating with law enforcement in ways they never had before. Los Hierros made a critical mistake, Mike observed as they watched the community rebuilding effort. They thought taking on one stubborn mechanic's shop would be a show of force. Instead, they revealed their own vulnerabilities. The shop itself became a symbol of resistance. Visitors from other towns came to see the battle-scarred building, to learn how an ordinary auto repair business had been transformed into a fortress that had withstood a cartel assault. Danny found himself conducting impromptu classes on community organization and defense. "We're getting requests from other communities," Sarah reported, scrolling through her messages. "They want to know how to set up similar security systems, how to coordinate neighborhood defense networks. Some are even asking if you'd be willing to consult on their security plans." Danny looked out over his damaged but defiant shop, watching as the community worked together to rebuild. The cartel had tried to break them through fear and violence, but they had achieved the opposite. San Cristóbal wasn't just rebuilding its buildings, it was emerging stronger, more united, and more determined than ever. "Set up a meeting," he told Sarah. "If other communities want to learn how to protect themselves, we'll teach them. The cartels think they can just move to another town, start over. Let's show them that every community can become a San Cristóbal." 6 months after the battle that changed San Cristóbal forever, Martinez Auto Works stood fully restored, its walls no longer bearing the scars of conflict. But the changes went far deeper than fresh paint and repaired walls. The shop had become something more, a symbol of resistance, hope, and community strength that reached far beyond Texas. Danny stood in his office, now expanded to include a small training center where he taught other communities the principles of organized resistance. The walls displayed photos of successful defensive operations from towns across the border region, each one a testament to the ripple effect of San Cristóbal's stand. "Latest report from the FBI task force," Sarah announced, entering with her ever-present tablet. Her role had evolved far beyond managing the shop's systems. She now coordinated a network of community defense programs across 3 states. Los Hierros' influence in the region is down 70%. Their recruitment is failing, their supply lines are compromised, and their remaining corrupt officials are running scared. Mike, who had taken charge of training community defense teams, added his own update. 4 more towns have implemented our security protocols. The cartel tried pushing into Martinez City last week, found themselves facing an organized, trained community resistance. They didn't even make it past the city limits. The shop itself had become a unique hybrid, part auto repair business, part training facility, part community center. Local citizens still brought their vehicles for repair, but they also came for defense training, security consultations, and to contribute to the growing network of community protection. "My cousin says even the Mexican towns across the border are starting to follow our example," Carlos reported. His family connections had become a vital part of their expanding influence. "They're tired of living under cartel control. When they saw what we did here, it gave them hope." Danny walked through his shop, watching his team at work. The mechanics still fixed cars with the same dedication as before, but now they did it with a deeper purpose. Every repaired vehicle, every satisfied customer was a reminder that normal life could flourish even in the face of criminal intimidation. "You've started something remarkable," Jack Reynolds said, arriving for his weekly briefing. The Texas Ranger commander had been instrumental in spreading their model of resistance to other jurisdictions. State police are reporting a systematic breakdown of cartel operations across the region. They can't maintain control when every community is organized and ready to resist. The evidence of their success was visible throughout San Cristóbal. Where once there had been fear and submission, now there was pride and determination. Businesses flourished, families walked the streets without fear, and the community's bonds grew stronger with each passing day. It's not just about fighting. "You back," Danny explained to a group of visitors from another border town. "It's about creating a system that makes it impossible for criminal organizations to gain a foothold. When every business owner, every farmer, every citizen is part of a coordinated defense network, the cartels lose their advantage." The shop's security systems, once a necessity for survival, had become a model for other communities. Sarah's expertise was in high demand as she helped other towns establish similar networks. "The key is adaptation," she explained to her students. "We're constantly updating our methods, staying one step ahead of their tactics." El Coyote's capture had proven to be a turning point in the broader war against the cartels. His detailed testimony, combined with the evidence gathered during the battle, had led to hundreds of arrests and the exposure of corruption at every level. The feared cartel commander now spent his days in federal custody, cooperating with authorities in exchange for protection. "You know what the real victory is?" Mike asked Danny one evening as they watched the sun set over the shop. "It's not just that we beat them here, it's that we showed everyone that they're not invincible, that with the right preparation and unity, any community can stand up to them." Danny nodded, thinking about how far they'd come from that first confrontation with Javier Ortiz. The cartels rely on fear and isolation. Once people realize they don't have to face them alone, that fear turns into strength. The impact of their resistance had spread far beyond what anyone could have predicted. Law enforcement agencies from across the country came to study their methods. International organizations documented their success as a model for community-based anti-cartel operations. What had started as one mechanic's refusal to submit had grown into a movement. "We're not done," Danny told his team as they gathered for their daily briefing. "As long as there are communities living in fear, our work continues. We didn't just build a defense system, we created a blueprint for freedom, and we're going to make sure everyone who needs it has access to it." The sun rose over San Cristóbal, illuminating a town transformed. Martinez Auto Works stood as it always had, ready to serve its community. But now it represented something more, a beacon of hope for other communities. Proof that with courage, unity, and the right leadership, no force of darkness could prevail against the human spirit's determination to live free. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.